Okay, we're going to move on to look a bit more at issues around skills development, particularly reading skills. We're going to build on the work that we've done so far with reading, and we're going to look at material that's more tutorial in function. So this relates back to ideas that we talked about in one of the early talks, where I compared tool use and tutorial use. So this is much more in the area of tutorial, but again I made the point that it depends on what you're doing, and it's about thinking your way through the tasks and relating to them to the text that you're dealing with. It relates directly to cognitive perspectives of reading, but these can be applied to other skill areas as well. And strategies are very much conscious actions that we engage in to improve language learning, and a lot of times these have to be taught people because they don't necessarily realise the best strategies to engage with. So an example there is of an observable strategy is someone taking notes in an academic lecture. Well, it's assumed increasingly that we don't need to take notes, but actually there's some evidence coming out that perhaps we should take notes more, and it's worth having a look at that if you're interested in it. We may then compare the notes that we've taken to other media. We might do it in real time now by looking up something on the web while we're listening to a lecture, but we might also do it later, where we might read a book or an article or something along those lines. Other types of strategies just may simply be internal strategies, in the sense that we reflect on something something that we know about the text, or ideas that come as we begin to read the text. Because strategies are conscious, then there's active involvement, and strategies are not isolated, but they work in tandem. They help us organize ideas, they help us think about what we're going to do, they help us begin to try and decode text in various kinds of ways. So this is built on work of Anderson, that you might like to have a look at if you're interested in this area. Reading has been defined for a long time as a psycholinguistic guessing game, and certainly when you in the early stages of learning to read, you do use a lot of guesswork, particularly if you're coming to a new script and you're trying to decode things. A lot of that happens, but it's complex, and you have different strategies. You have the bottom-up strategies of letter recognition I've just mentioned, learning vocabulary, beginning to piece that vocabulary together into some kind of format, grammatical structures, play some role here. You have top-down strategies, so the sort of things that you bring to a text, particularly if you're an adult. You look at a text in a certain kind of way, bringing meaning to that text, maybe even if it's not in a language that you know very well. You can begin to bring meaning to that text in some kind of way. So you apply your skills and prior knowledge, your meanings that you've taken in your context. And the other element about it is it's interactive. So the kind of, I suppose, the stage that we're at, the way that we see it now, is it's an interactive process, a mixture of bottom-up and top-down skills working together. So applying your knowledge of the world to the text that you're trying to decode, your sense of developing sense of an understanding of a script, or an understanding of the vocabulary as it begins to kind of stop being something that's completely incomprehensible, to being something that you begin to sort of piece together and make sense of. One type of activity that we're going to have a look at today, because I think they're still interesting, although they're not talked about so much in the literature anymore. Although if you see on the wiki, you'll see that there are some more recent references. And certainly notions of tutorial, Cal, are beginning to come back much more in focus, as I mentioned in the text on the wiki. And one of the types of text activity you can still find examples of these, plenty of them around, are text reconstruction. And these involve memory strategies. You have to remember, you have to reconstruct a text. You have to kind of take a bunch of blanks and reconstruct a text, or you can, have text that are, gapped, certain words are missing. You have what Legenhausen and Wolf call text-independent strategies. You're bringing to play linguistic knowledge that you have to that text, so it's not just about strategy, memory. It's about you're building knowledge of a language, and then as you'll see when you try this out, if you haven't ever done one of these before, you'll see that actually as you begin to build text, it begins to make sense. And certainly, I who have recently started trying to decode text in a new language, or not a new language, but a language that I don't read very well, in Farsi, I can see this working, where I begin to see that the individual letters begin to make sense and become words that I recognize. And as I build up a picture of a text, I see more and more meaning coming out from that text. So it's very similar to a text reconstruction exercise. I look at a blank, a block of words in this script that I can hardly decode, and slowly it begins to make sense, and I recognize a word and I recognize a combination of letters, and then I suddenly think, oh, that's that word, and it begins to sort of form into something that's comprehensible. And I think that's very similar to the sort of activity that goes on in text reconstruction. So you're going to have a look at some tasks. So look at the tasks that are on the wiki, and think about the reading strategies that come into play. And there's a handout there if you want to print out and have a look at that. There are different bits of authoring software. Many of you may be familiar with tools like Hot Potatoes. There's people in Hong Kong called Clarity who create a range of different software. And then more recently, not a very kind of complex piece of software, but Quizlet, which is fundamentally it's software that is fundamentally flashcards. Then that's a modern version which you can actually use on a mobile phone. So I guess that these bits of software will become more complex as time goes on. You certainly see in most of the apps that I've seen that I've downloaded and tried to use, a lot of this kind of exercise is built in, and there's no doubt that they form a significant part of examinations in the world. So you'll find some sample examples online. There's quite a lot at the University of Victoria English Language Centre, where they created some of the Hot Potatoes material. And then there's a nice site called English Online France as well, which is help you to get some ideas about the kinds of ways that people are using it. If you want to follow this up, there's some more recent, some older literature rather, and some more recent. There's an older article by Cobb and Stevens, Gutierrez, in 2006 in Recall, and a more recent article by Hartwell in System.